Hey guys, and welcome to the Surge Growth Partner Podcast. I'm excited to have our guest today, Tom Kirkham. We'll be diving into some of his story, his company, Kirkham Iron Tech, what they specialize in, and some engaging insights into the cybersecurity industry. So I'll go ahead and kick it off to you, Tom. Why don't you please introduce yourself and tell a quick snippet of your story and your background prior to starting Kirkham Iron Tech?
Oh, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And my background, I've been in technology for well over 30, probably pushing 40 years now. I started as a hobbyist. I had a whole different job and everything else, but I was a nerd, am a nerd. And so I built my own computer, used it for the beginning parts of investing, which I've been a self-directed investor all of my life. And so that was kind of the beginnings of it. And then I found a way to make it a career. And it was initially in software development and software designer. And, the second in charge at a company, it's a startup basically. And during those 7 or 8 years, I think, won a few Microsoft Designer Awards. I think I won 4. And because of the dot-com bust, I got laid off. I have no college degree, and I found myself in a small town that IT people with no college degrees have a very hard time finding a job. So I did. Anyone that's read the book, The E-Myth, understands what I'm saying. It wasn't this entrepreneurial spirit. It wasn't this tired of working for the man, I'm going to revolutionize the world. I started the company because I needed money. I needed an income. And so totally bootstrapped, totally broke, started it out of my house, and found myself on the radio and doing the commercials. And then it was a talk radio show, so they'd bring in advertisers. That worked out so well that led me to a weekly guest to take answers about computer stuff. And then that worked its way into an hour-long show. Every Saturday, I did an hour-long call-in radio show for computer problems. And it wasn't a paid show. They didn't pay me. I didn't pay them. And it was real popular in town. I did it for about 4 years. And it really established us from a marketing perspective. I don't know how many people could do that. It's just going to be something that if you can pull it off, great. I just, the planets aligned, or however your karma system works, it just worked out. And so we gradually just built and built and built. And that's where we are today. So I'm CEO and founder and acting Chief Information Security Officer for Kirkham Iron Tech. We are what's known as a managed security service provider and a managed services provider. And basically the difference between those two different segments of the industry is the MSSP is security, MSP is IT. And we started as IT, but many, many years ago, we went down the security pathway.
That's great, man. And it's a phenomenal story. Very, very unique, definitely. I am curious as to kind of, what sparked your interest to kind of get into cybersecurity. What was it that initially sparked that passion of yours that you have? I know you said you're a born nerd, but I'm sure there's a little bit more that goes into that. So I'm curious as to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah. So one of my superpowers is looking, and it made me successful in investing in technology companies. That's my specialty, right? I got in Bitcoin over 10 years ago, and I bought Tesla when everybody thought they were going to go broke, and there's others. But my superpower is saying, oh, this is a new technology. Is this going to be revolutionary like the World Wide Web? Of course, I had no appreciation for how big it was going to be. I don't think anyone did. But I knew it was important. I knew it was a seminal event in human history, and I did investments accordingly. And I did direction to all of my company and the previous company and how to move and, take advantage of what's happening 2 years down the road and so on. But as an IT provider, an IT service provider, I could see that security was going to become more and more important. So we started gradually focusing on security, like adding it on to our book of services, right? You need better security. But then a funny thing happened a couple of years after that, and I had a visit from an FBI agent that walked into the office. It was one of those days to where it's not an official holiday. It was like a Friday before July 4th, type of thing, or something like that, or the Friday after Thanksgiving. You're kind of open, but you're not. And it was one of those days that it was just me and the president in the office about 9 o'clock in the morning. I think it was a Friday. And FBI agent comes in, says, "I'm so-and-so with the FBI. I'm looking for Tom Kirkham. You're in trouble, but not with us." So, long story short, he walks in. I'm sitting in the president's office, and he says, "You're on an ISIS kill list. Your name, your address, place of employment, other personal information about you." And so I'm thinking, oh, wow, let me see your credentials again. I haven't ever seen the FBI stuff close up. And, just kind of, it wasn't clicking. It just wasn't clicking, right? So we're just kind of shooting the breeze. And finally I said, "Well, what does this mean? I mean, are they going to try to hack my bank accounts, or, what does this mean?" He goes, "No, you're named to be killed by ISIS." So now I don't want to exaggerate that, because there were thousands of people in that period that were on different kill lists, right? And it was for those of you that are listening, if you remember back 2015, there was like 5 or 6 kill lists that came out in that time frame, and there was one list that was unique. The others were law enforcement, political targets, former and current military targets, mostly New York Metro, Washington DC Metro. And there was one list that was seemingly random, and it was people all over the United States. And at the time, they didn't really know much about it. But over the past 8 years, that happened in 2015. Over the past 8 years, I finally came across the list, and I started going through it. What's the commonality on this list? And I saw that it was all technology people. And it looks to me like I was at a conference where Sun Microsystems, if you remember that company, they went bust after the .com days, but during .com, if you were a .com company, you put Sun Microsystems stuff. I mean, that was all the web servers were Sun Microsystems. And I had a private viewing that you had to register for. They had to approve you to see technology they hadn't released yet. And so they had a whole database, security credentials and everything. Well, a U.S. citizen in the state of Georgia breached their systems and pulled that database out. And this is years earlier. Found that database, sent it. She was a member of the United Cyber Caliphate, which is, or what is or was, ISIS's NSA, U.S. Cyber Command. It was their cyber warfare unit. She sent it to them, said, "This is our latest kill list." And that's how I ended up on the list. So that's what really drove my passion for cybersecurity, that it's not necessarily that you get conned into, giving somebody $300 or, ransomware attacks. I mean, breaches really can and truly be life-threatening, right? And like I started to say earlier, I don't want to exaggerate it. There's thousands and thousands of us that are on different lists for ISIS. It's not like Salman Rushdie and being an actual fatwa, But what you have to worry about, and anyone that's on one of these lists, that you have to worry about these lone wolves that want to go train with ISIS. They're U.S. citizens. They sympathize and they get sucked in. And what better way to kill somebody than in the town that you live in? So that's the real fear. But of course, now time has made that less and less and less. So I didn't speak about it publicly for years, but it's something that is kind of the root of my passion for cybersecurity.
Wow, that's amazing, man. It's very unique. I've talked to a lot of different, founders and CEOs. I definitely think this is probably one of the most unique stories that I've heard before. I did want to kind of touch on some of, because you made a distinction there about the MSP and the MSSP kind of separation or trend that we're seeing right now. I think that being in the space right now, I've kind of noticed that some companies are no longer really happy with just their MSP, doing the security for them, and they're looking for someone to do, a full time security monitoring, incident response, and so that's one of the trends that I'm seeing right now, where we're having this. If your security is being done by the MSP, it's kind of like, oh well, they can't do everything, right? And so I'm curious as to get your take on that. Maybe some other trends that maybe you see right now that's kind of happening in the cybersecurity industry.
Oh, that is a absolute terrific question, and it's one of the reasons that I make a distinction. Even though we do both, we're an MSSP first. Okay, so think about the role and their objective from an IT perspective, right? Or you're an owner of a company. You invest in IT because it makes you more profitable, it grows your top line revenues, makes your organization more productive and more efficient. And that's why it's an investment. It's not an expense, and you got to understand that. And that's a deeper subject than we need to get into right now. But you need to treat it as an investment. Your investment in cybersecurity is to keep you from going out of business, having a catastrophic security event that is going to destroy your reputation. There's a lot of things that can happen. Fines. Um, there's just all sorts of things that can happen. Your clients and customers could have identity theft. I mean, everyone knows a lot of these. And so your objective in investing in security has a different reason for being there. And what we're seeing today is a management decision. It's a no-brainer, right? You don't have to be convinced the return on investment on investing in IT. Now, 40 years ago, you did. When a computer cost $10,000, a PC cost $10,000 or whatever, and you had to do a lot of money in training and all of that. But now it's a no-brainer. They're cheap. You know it's going to work. You don't have to think it through. But many, many people, business leaders or business managers, don't fully appreciate the risk there is to it happening to you. Most people don't understand the volume and the scale of just the criminal part of the hacking industry. So today it's more of a leadership decision. Like, oh well, we've got to worry about 2 years down the road of being breached, and what's the fallout from that. The return on investment in cybersecurity should always be negative over years and for forever, I guess. But anyway, at least over years and years and years, right? Because that means you're investing properly because you don't have a security event. It's kind of like insurance in a way. The key difference there is we stop attacks. Insurance and law enforcement is an after attack response. So, there's a lot of things to it, but when that happened with the FBI, and we saw more and more attacks, and the criminals especially really becoming professionals at this. It's a huge, huge industry. This year it's forecast, I think, to be a $10 trillion worldwide industry. It's larger by far than the global worldwide illegal drug trade.
Yeah, there was someone that was I was talking with yesterday, and we were talking kind of about AI and how AI is obviously able to help a lot in terms of cybersecurity, and you're able to have scanners and that you're able to implement AI with. But on the flip side of the coin, it also helps out the attackers because they're able to then use AI to try to see where the vulnerabilities lie within companies and be able to exploit them that way. So that's what the introduction of new technology to even defend sometimes is also going to be used against you as well. So that's kind of the teetering thought that I'm seeing as well.
Yeah, and in fact, the bad news is AI is definitely going to, or already has. It's resulting in more and more breaches. And when you understand that 95% of successful attacks are because of human error, and it's usually a phishing email or a drive-by compromised website pop-up or something. It's psychological techniques. They're just con jobs, really. That's all they are. And one of the ways that we're seeing it, we saw them test earlier this year, but it's in production now. They can draw through artificial intelligence targeted attacks at scale. For example, these phishing emails, these con job emails, rather than it being from Chase or Citibank or Citi now. These generic, your account credentials may have been compromised, click here, right?
Mhm.
Now we are seeing in our own office and our clients' offices where it looks like it's an email from me. It's to someone that directly reports to me with my title, my signature. And due to the roles, the email is carefully crafted to be especially compelling, right? It's a targeted attack. Up until this iterative AI, like ChatGPT, that type of investment from a hacking perspective was prohibitive because they want to do 100,000 emails. They couldn't customize each one of those 100,000. Well, now they can, and they are, and they will continue to do so.
Yeah.
So they can do this at scale with ChatGPT and other AI tools. And so that 95% number is going to go higher and higher and higher.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I think that's a nice segue to kind of your company and what your company does and how they help, companies stay safe amongst these high, these breaches that are going to happen. It's not a matter of time. It's not like it's never going to happen. It's almost a matter of time before you get hit, right? And so, what is it that your company offers that you think your clients get the most value from?
We've got a unique risk assessment, right? And we also do IT assessments too, because understanding that investment in IT, just because you're saving a bunch of money and not spending on IT doesn't mean that's an effective use, right? You may not
Yeah.
be maximizing your ROI. So we
Mhm.
look at things like benchmarking. What do your peers spend on IT? So we know that in professional service firms, law firms, accounting firms, usually engineering firms, they should be spending 6 to 12% of their gross revenue on their entire IT and cybersecurity budget. And that means servers, routers, switches, desktops, on and on and on. And of that benchmark, 10% should be committed to cybersecurity. Okay. Now, so if you're listening and you're only spending 3%, you're probably not spending on your IT enough. You're not getting maximum return on investment. And if you're not at that 10% number, I promise you, you've got gaps in your cybersecurity defense. And that's the very first step in the NIST cybersecurity framework. You've got to do an assessment. And from a cybersecurity perspective, which is what NIST CSF is about, you've got to know the condition of your ship before you set sail, before you open the door tomorrow. Understand what your weaknesses, your vulnerabilities are. And our approach is to take that to the deepest level we can in an organization. We call it a 3 pillars approach. We're going to do a gap analysis or an assessment of the IT infrastructure from a ROI perspective. And then we're going to do a vulnerability assessment from a security perspective. But the most important part, and the only reason the other two can be fixed and the only reason the other two work, is because of governance, corporate governance, policies, procedures. It's the guidelines of everything. And that's the third pillar in our approach whenever we engage with a new client and continually engage with clients, is to understanding what are their business objectives. We do a deep dive into their organization, because your IT and your cybersecurity, it has limited effectiveness if you're not deeply engaged with management. You've got to align both of those things with all parts of management, CEO, everybody in the C-suite to a mom and pop business. You've got to be 100% aligned with the owner. And if you don't do that, you're going to miss out from an IT perspective. You're going to miss out on, hey, you could do a productivity gain right here. Drop in some widescreen monitors, put in dual monitors. There's math on that. It increases productivity. It's the ROI is a month, maybe, at best. And then security, you've got vulnerabilities, and then here's the risk that you probably aren't realizing, because you think, why would someone want to attack me? I'm in a little rural town in the middle of nowhere in a business that I don't have any special information. Well, most people aren't aware that they don't really care, and most attacks, they don't know who you are. Could care less. They're fully automated. It's a numbers game, right? They think in terms of conversion rates. So as a hacker, if I'm spewing out 100,000 emails, I collect an average of $10,000 per victim, but only 1% is victims. That's a $10 million payday.
Yeah.
For a couple of weeks of work. So that's our unique approach. And a lot of IT people, they don't develop that relationship, and we really try to figure out all the nooks and crannies that we can, and really develop a feel for the culture. And our best clients are the ones that have a very similar culture to ours. They're open-minded. They're going, what do you mean I don't spend enough? You're just saying that because you sell this stuff, right? And I said, well, no, let's, these are benchmarks. These are standards worldwide. It's not any good IT or cybersecurity company can articulate the very same message, and then we walk them through it. And that's part of the relationship building. That's super important. And clients that don't follow advice and they create situations to where we have to say, okay, we're going to, it's too much of a hassle to do this security practice that is best practice, international standards, but I don't want to use multi-factor authentication because I don't like it, right? I refuse. All right. If anything happens because you refuse it, sign this paper. We've briefed you on it. You understand the risk and you accept it. And sometimes that's not just a bad attitude thing with clients. Sometimes it's a decision on risk reward, right? You can't be 100% protected. But if you do nothing, at any given year, you've probably got a 10% chance of having a significant event. And our objective from a security standpoint, which is job one, it doesn't override IT decisions, not often anyway. Our objective from an IT perspective is to drop that risk percentage to a 0.1 or a 0.01% chance. And all of this stuff is affordable these days. It's not like it was 10 years ago where it was unaffordable for small to medium-sized businesses to use the same defense at, say, a Ford Motor Company or AT&T. That's just simply not true, because the good guys scale as well. So it's all affordable.
Definitely. And piggybacking off that, why don't you go? I know you obviously can't name companies in particular, but why don't you tell a story maybe of a really one of your best clients or most successful transformations that you've seen that your company has been a part of, or kind of something that comes top of mind?
Oh, let's see. How about a cyber attack?
Let's do that.
Yeah, well, I'll a little bit about the storyline. That's kind of an official term in our business, but it's how did this attack play out, right? Doing detective work. But and we're a national company. We've got some international endpoints, but mostly U.S. But we had a surgeon's office. It was an oral surgeon, so he had his own office, right? It's not a hospital. Privately owned. And we immediately detected an attack was underway. And it was a very, very vicious one, the worst one we've seen. And it was just hammering all the defensive tools that we'd put in place. And yes, it was triggered by a human being in the office. They clicked on a malicious file attachment and began it. Our defenses were holding up, right? They were preventing it from getting worse. But I'm watching this in real time, and it's not killing it. It was doing what's known as a lateral movement. It was using every computer in the network to relentlessly attack and attempt to encrypt files on every device it could find. It was relentless. And the tools were doing a good job. That line of defense was stopping the battle, but it wasn't killing the battle, right? And I'm sitting here watching this in real time, and and I'm going, this line of defense is going to break, and we're going to be in a world of trouble. Well, they're open. They're doing surgeries. Okay. The decision was made to call the office and say, you got to shut down. We got to turn all these computers off immediately. Now, we've got other partner vendors that are writing code to kill it, but that takes time. We'd engage with two of our partner vendors. One of them is a former NSA guy, the CEO is, and the other one is one of the best well-known names in the industry. SentinelOne, their tool was the one getting really hammered. And so these guys are working in the background. We're shutting the office down. The surgeon said, we can't shut down. We got patients. About 5 minutes later, gets a call from the president and says, you either shut down or fire us. That's how serious this attack is. And thankfully, he listened to our advice. And it was a Thursday. So he did have to reschedule everybody that day. But since it was a Thursday and it's kind of a dentist office, dentists don't work a whole lot on Fridays, that gave us the weekend to mitigate and at least get them up and running. And had we not done that, instead of him being down or crippled for a few days, they never were really down except for that first attack day when we turned everything off. We got them up and running by Monday morning, limping around, but they could go back to work and get revenue and patients and all of that. But it took several days to clean it up because it was vicious. It was a vicious attack.
Yeah. No, I think that
But
really
he would have been down for weeks or forever, right?
I mean, I think the average data breach, if I was looking at it, I think it's anywhere from like 90 days, like especially like when they are inside the system and they can kind of, when they're undetected inside your system, and then it's even harder to kind of get them out as well. But I think your point of incident response, I think that's super important in what an MSSP is able to provide in your company as well, as being able to respond to that incident when it does happen, because it's not like I was saying, it's a matter of time when it does happen. It's going, someone's going to click on a link. There's a human error always, because you can only do so much to put a human firewall, right? But at some point, all it takes is one person to let everything in, right? So you have to be willing. It's almost, I had someone explain it to me like a fight, almost like you're in a fight with the hacker, and so you have to be able to be prepared to fight them.
Yeah. Well, it's like going to war. I mean, it literally is a war. I mean, a battle. And it is, and the humans are the weakest link. So all these wonderful tools and all these professionals, InfoSec professionals that are responding and mitigating and remediating, all of these, it's called a layered defense or defense in depth strategy. You have layer after layer after layer. You assume that your tanks are going to get blown up, right? So, but you got artillery, right? Or you got infantry, or you got air support, Yeah. And so we put all these layers in there, and the main reason we have to do that is because we know that this attack is likely because somebody let them into the network. And that's the nature of the world we live in, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I do have a question on what do you see some of the most common challenges your clients are facing usually before they start working with you, and how do you help solve those?
Well, we do a lot of continuing education, like CLEs for attorneys, law firms, accounting societies, engineering societies, these professional service firms. And so they get credit. They have to get credit for these courses. And so I spend one of my roles, my primary role these days is to be the chief evangelist. And the biggest hurdle is getting people to understand the sheer scale of the risk. It's getting over that mindset. Why would anybody want to attack me? Getting back to too small, middle of nowhere, blah, blah, blah. And that's not the reality. The vast majority of attacks are small to medium-sized businesses. Everybody hears the Colonial Pipelines, JBS Meat Supply, Sony Pictures Corporation on CNN, New York Times. Everybody knows that. But the hackers don't want to be on CNN, I promise you. Because then Interpol, FBI, and others are going to start going to target them. They want to keep that low profile. The real money for a hacker or nation-state objectives, the real value is staying under the radar and doing things at scale. And that means you can make a long career out of doing especially ransomware attacks. And so I spend a lot of time, and as you can imagine, when I'm talking to 50 attorneys over Zoom in a CLE, invariably somebody says, you're just saying it because you sell this stuff. And I go, no, if you really knew everything that I know, it would be unbelievable. If anything, I'm understating. And all you've got to do is find somebody that's a true InfoSec professional, and they'll validate what I'm saying. And yeah, it's.
Fortunately, people tend to prioritize cybersecurity after a breach, right? And that's what we see too. It's like people only want to put a gate up once their house gets broken, or they only want to put cameras in once something happens, right? And I think cybersecurity should be served as that preventative measure where it's like, listen, this is bound to happen, right? So if you don't have this in place, you are going to put yourself in a very vulnerable position where your reputation is on the line, money's on the line, all these different cost factors are on the line. And if you don't have these put in place, you're leaving yourself to a lot of risk that is going to outweigh the money that you pay for cybersecurity as well. So that's like the return investment that you were talking about. Like cybersecurity, even though it's hard to determine ROI for cybersecurity, there is a big ROI for cybersecurity because, like you said, in case of a breach or the downtime, there's all these different factors.
Yeah, and we try to iterate that during the training sessions and stress it. It is by far cheaper and by far more successful to implement and pay for the defenses than it is to mitigate. When I do conferences and they got an FBI agent or somebody from the Department of Homeland, and they're talking about cybersecurity, I'm amazed at the people that will flock to those conferences, but mine's not full, right? They want to hear the FBI guy, right? And I've talked to them, they're speaker people, and I go up to them and say, man, why don't you tell them how to stop it? All you got, they're an after the fact investigative team. I try to stress to those people, these accountants and attorneys, that it's much easier, much more successful to try to defend. The law enforcement's a last resort that you need to talk to. Be proactive. Turn on that vision that you have and really open your eyes to the true vulnerabilities and the true risk to your firm that a significant cyber attack represents.
Definitely. Now, I have a couple more questions. One of them being around being the founder of a cybersecurity. I'm curious of a cybersecurity company. I'm curious as some of the main challenges that you've been presented throughout your careers, and for other CEOs and founders, what would be your advice to kind of overcome those?
Man, that's a great question. Yeah, for me, and I would imagine this is common for a lot of entrepreneurs, especially if you did it the way I did it, or like it's described in the book, The E-Myth. Big fan of that, by the way. It is understanding as you grow the company. I was a one-man shop for several months in the beginning, and you're doing everything. You're wearing all the hats all the time. And then as you grow your organization, you've got to give up control. You can't micromanage everything. That everyone knows this. Well, the first step is acknowledging that and trying to figure out how to, you're in charge of this, how to delegate responsibilities. As you get larger and larger, your role changes, right? So when you start building an organization chart, and you're the president. What is the president of a, 10-person company? What is the duties of that role? It's not the duties necessarily of the things that you think you need to do or even want to do, arguably. You have to think about each of these different things. But what's your primary role as the president? And then when I made the move to the CEO role, what is the CEO's role as opposed to the president that works in the company? And when you think about it from a role perspective, because I was a guy for decades, I wasn't a big believer in titles. Okay. I think everybody should work for everybody, and our culture is servant leadership culture. You guys can look that up for those of you who are listening. It's a very effective leadership technique and makes for happy people, happy clients, happy customers. But understanding what a CEO's role is, and then from my perspective, I picked and choose the things that I wanted to do and act as a supporting role for everyone in the company. I go to the president, I go to anybody, support people. What can I do to make you not only successful in your job or in life, but do I need to grease a wheel for you? Are you trying to get something out of marketing that they're not responsive? Let me know. I can make that happen. Okay. Because we're all a team here. And that's one of the things that I found in that CEO role that I really enjoy. And the other one is doing what I'm doing right now. It's evangelizing. It's not just the company. I'm really here to evangelize and educate all of your listeners in cybersecurity and IT management and those investments and all of those things that go along with it, right? And that's what I love doing. I absolutely love it, and I do, because I started a lot of this during COVID. The rare times I get speaking gigs in person, I really love those. So yeah, and then I wrote a couple of books and got another one on the way. So it's a fun time. Fun time.
Talents, man.
Well, a man of what is it? Man of many talents, master of none.
Well, you're jack of all trades, jack of all trades.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
I'm curious as to get your opinion on because you did touch a little bit about marketing and sales challenges that you've seen within the industry. What are those, and what are some solutions that you've seen to those? Or I know you talked about education, that's huge, but if you can expand a little bit on that as well.
Yeah. So what we did as a company, in the MSP business and now the MSSP business, I was shocked to learn that and this number's from a few years ago, but it's probably roughly the same. There's over 60,000 MSPs in the country. 60,000. I was shocked to hear that. And I attended a conference from which I didn't know this at the time, but one of the best well-known marketing gurus, and her niche was MSPs. She saw how big the market was. Her name's Robin Robbins.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, see, you know who she is, right? And so I joined her program, and because I realized how important marketing was, and that's what a lot of MSPs and MSSPs fail, right?
Mm-hmm.
The owner guy is the tech guru. He's in the weeds every day. And I said, I got to pull out of this, and I've got to do sales and marketing, because that's really what the company exists for.
Mm-hmm.
And she was a big help in opening my eyes to those things. And then the more I got into it, I realized, wow, this is a huge industry, because marketing was one of these nebulous, vague things to me, like it is for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of funny. And if she's listening, she knows this. She's a name dropper, right? And so she started naming these other marketing gurus that were her mentors.
Mm-hmm.
The Joe Polishes, I'm name dropping too. The Joe Polishes and the Dan Kennedys and on and on, Dan Kennedy and all these other gurus. I started joining up with them, and I became a marketing expert. Or at least in my own mind, I did, right? Self-proclaimed experts usually aren't, but I did get good at it. And so we looked at direct response and incoming and outbound, marketing campaigns and all the different, it's message, media, moment, then you mind share, brand awareness, and over a couple of 3 years, I started building up. After I felt like I had a good control of it, I started building up a sales and marketing staff, and then tried to transfer as best I could what I had learned. And we're still doing production. We're moving this stuff out, these different marketing campaigns, various medias, and now we're doing PR and things like that, and trying to build it all in house. and then they are in turn getting trained by these other gurus in the industry as well. Because you can't just plug in your brain to somebody else, right?
Yeah.
And they're going to hear it in a different perspective that may click better, right? It may be the same message, but it's worded in a different manner that a light bulb goes off. You got to be aware of everyone's learning weaknesses and strengths. We all have them. And the more in tune you are to everybody in the organization, the more effective your leadership is going to be. And the management. You're going to be more effective at management and leadership.
A lot of gems, man. You just dropped a lot of gems, especially as a founder myself. I see that, culture is huge, right? The way that you communicate with your team members, the way that you're motivating them, right? And you are a team, and if you try to be a dictator, you're never going to build a good culture. People aren't going to want to work for you. And yeah, I think those are some great points. And also the challenges of sales and marketing. I think especially in the MSP owners and MSSP owners that I've talked to, they're all really big tech guys, and they're all really, they love technology. But when it comes to the marketing and the sales aspects, they're like, I hate that stuff, and they're always, and I see a lot of them tend to just kind of not gravitate towards. They don't want to learn it. They'll hire somebody else. But I think it's important for a founder and a CEO to always, you have to learn sales and marketing. It's like a pivotal to any type of business that you're ever going to run. It requires you to, get new customers. Who's your ideal customer profile? How are you going to speak to them? How are you going to start conversations? Content around what you're creating, educating. So I think that's important. All of what you said. And I just have one last question for you to kind of wrap this up. This was a phenomenal interview, by the way. I just want to ask, if you had to say the most two important things that you've learned in your career, what would you leave here and say the two most important things are that you've learned throughout your career?
Wow.
I know that's hard. I know it's a tough
Yeah.
question.
All right. I got one, and it touches on what we just talked about. No matter if you're going to be the president or the owner, the head honcho, okay, it didn't matter what your title is. If you're the guy or gal that's answerable to everybody and all the customers, all the employees, and the IRS and everything else that's part of your duties, you've at least got to understand the concepts of the jobs that you don't want to do, that you're not any good at. Because you can't, if you don't know anything at all about marketing, and you go out and hire an outside consultant, and I've seen this over and over again, it takes time for marketing programs to start generating revenue. And if you go out and you do, well, this marketing guru said we do this, whatever it is, radio advertising, billboards, it doesn't matter. And I know that's advertising, and I know the difference, but regardless.
Yeah.
And you give it 2 months and it doesn't work, well, then you don't really understand marketing, right?
Yeah.
And so you got to take the time to understand what marketing really is, why it exists, do some history, and then understand clearly what the objectives are and what your expectations should be.
Yeah.
Before you think about giving it to somebody else, whether it's in-house or outsource it, because otherwise your expectations are likely to be wrong, and you're going to spend a ton of money getting an education, if you ever do, on everything that you do wrong without having that core concepts understood clearly. You're not going to grow the company in that part of it, at least, and you're not going to grow as a person. And I think the best leadership are self-learners, autodidacts. They're lifelong learners. They're self-educated. The other one, I think, and I was talking to a friend of mine about this week, is we don't have the luxury these days of academic education, especially if you've got a job or a company to run. But I think it's really true for almost everything. Almost everything. You don't have the time. A 4-year degree in marketing, it only gets you so far. I can go spend 6 months with Robin Robbins and Dan Kennedy and get 10 years of experience, just the few things that they toss out there in 6 months. I'm talking about a practically applied real life education, and you want to compress that learning time. A good example of this is Tim Ferriss's book, the 4-hour work week, right? Well, everybody thinks that it's a get rich quick book, right? You work 4 hours a week and you get to vacation, live on the beach, right? But the core concept of that book is, how do I quickly master a role in a company to get maximum effectiveness? That's really what he does. That's what he does on his podcast. That's what he did with Tools of Titans book. That's really the core concept. It's not a get rich quick book. That's what people miss about it. And it was a big eye opener for me about 8 or 10 years ago when I first read it. Whenever I think it had already been out a couple of years. But it's about time compression, especially when it comes to learning. How can I master this subject as fast as possible?
Definitely. And I think that you brought up a great point. It has to be, I think I'm always paying for knowledge is the best way to go, right? Like especially if someone has knowledge that you want and there's like some type of mentorship, some type of program that you can join where you know that they're doing things at a high level, it's worth you to take that investment to be able to learn those skills, because otherwise, like you said, it would take you way longer to be able to learn those skills, and you'd be able to cut the time in half, maybe even, more than half, right? Learning those things from somebody else who has already done it and they've already made the mistakes. They can tell you what not to avoid and they can give you the right expectations. Because, like you said, if you think you're going to turn on marketing within 1 to 2 months and start getting results, then you obviously haven't marketed before, because it's a constant testing. I almost call it like a science, because you have to test every single angle. You have to test who you're speaking to, the way that you put your message out there. So it has to be very methodical. And if you think that you're just going to get a winning angle after you run 3 or 4 campaigns, then you're going to be marketing is going to be very hard for you. I think the best marketers are the people who test the most. That's what I always say, because you're going to find a winning campaign at some point, but you have to be able to put in the time to really test and figure out exactly what works for your company.
I agree. You're going to pay for an education one way or the other.
Yeah.
Now, the question is how quick can you get an ROI on it? Okay. Whether you go to college, whether you hire consultants and may or may not listen to them.
Yeah. That's another
or you try to do it yourself, or you don't do it methodically and you just keep hiring advertising companies and marketing companies one after the other, and you're just pissing away money. Any of those learning styles, you're investing in your own education. Now, what's the best use of that time? Time is the most valuable thing you have. But what's the best use of that time and the money? And making sure you can get it as fast as possible to make you more effective at whatever that objective is. It's not just marketing. It's all roles in the company. So, and life. I'll say that's a life lesson too. So.
Hey, man. Well, it's been amazing having you on. I really appreciate you coming over here and sharing your story. You've got a really unique story, probably the most unique that I've heard out of anybody that I've interviewed. I would love to have you just drop maybe some places where people can find you. And if people did maybe hear something that they liked and they want to work with your company, what are some of the first steps that they can take to kind of starting that engagement with you?
Yeah, for those of you that are listening, I'm going to spell it out, but my name is Tom Kirkham, Kirkham. So it's spelled phonetically, it's Kirkham, right? It's real simple. And the company is KirkhamIronTech.com. Iron Tech's just like it sounds. I have another website with the books and the speaking engagement stuff and the more of a, I don't even know what you call it. But anyway, it's TomKirkham.com. That's real easy. And those are great ways to get in touch with me. I'm sure you'll have it in the show notes and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about sharing knowledge. And this is no BS. I just enjoy especially learning from people. Yeah, because we both learn, right? And when you find that connection with somebody that, oh wow, that's pretty impressive, and oh wow, I never thought about it from that perspective, and it's like those light bulbs go off. And when you've got a two-way conversation like that, it should be enjoyable, and I certainly do enjoy them. So it's not about sales all the time. Sales are a byproduct of relationships.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hey, man, thank you again. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a great rest of your day and take care, okay?
All right. Thank you very
All right.
much. It's been my pleasure to be here. Thank you.